Hi folks, it's Big John here. Now I'm sitting at home on a wet, cold and windy February day, and if you've been reading my blog you'll know that a couple of days before I was due to leave for my February 20 motorbike trip to Thailand, I took the decision to pull out of that trip due to the coronavirus outbreak in China, which had already spread to Thailand. I had promised to upload a video of that trip, but obviously I can't do that now. However, over the last few years I've already ridden several thousands of miles through Thailand, Laos, Cambodia and Myanmar on my previous visits. Now these are all fascinating countries with lovely people and different cultures, very much different from our own, and offering a absolutely different riding experience. So why not stay with me now and let's relive those adventures, and you can hear about some of the crazy things that have happened along the way. When you're retired like me, I can tell you that the winter months really drag. And between November and April, I may only get to ride a few days due to the nasty weather we get in the UK. So I thought, where in the world can I go that's warm and sunny to ride a bike at this time of year? And that's how I came up with Thailand. The next challenge was to find a reputable tour operator in the region. You know, I want a proper ride and an adventure, not a sightseeing holiday. Luckily I stumbled across Tony's Big Bikes in Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand, run by two British guys, Duncan and Jeff, and they seemed to offer just what I was looking for, with a tour aimed at people like me who wanted to ride. So I booked in for my first tour, Northern Thailand and Laos, in February 2015. And after about 17 hours in all, I was there. It was 8 o'clock at night and it was warm. I managed to find my way through the crazy chaos of the airport and got a taxi to take me to a quaint little guest house that TBB had booked me into, as it was very near their shop. The place was run by a very nice Thai lady, but she does seem to be drunk most of the time. Her brother turned out to be a Liverpool supporter, so I was welcomed with open arms. The next day I had time to explore the old town of Chiang Mai and met up with the guys at TBB. Now, unlike Bangkok, Chiang Mai is more laid back and not so crowded, but it still has lots of temples and interesting places to visit. Our route for the trip would take us north to the border with Myanmar and then on to the Golden Triangle, and that's the point where Thailand, Myanmar and Laos meet. We'd then cross into Laos, where we would spend the next week riding from its northern border with China down to the capital, Vientiane, then cross back into Thailand and ride back to Chiang Mai, in all about 1500 miles. Now my bike for the trip was to be a BMW F800 GS, which I'd paid extra for. The others were all on 500cc Hondas, apart from our leader Duncan, who was on his favourite Honda CRF 250 Enduro. The group included 4 Aussies, comprising 2 single guys plus a father and his 17-year-old daughter riding pillion. None of them were experienced bikers, and in fact one of the guys had only ever ridden a bike on his sheep farm and never on the road. The rest of the group were Brits, a retired guy with his wife as pillion, 2 single guys who turned out to be 250cc club racers, and then Duncan, our tour leader, and me. I could see this was going to turn into Fast Boys group and the rest. On our first day we met at TBB, got our gear on and set off to Mai Sai, the most northerly point of Thailand where it borders Myanmar. 300 kilometres, mix of fast sweepers where the fast boys had fun, and then tight mountain passes which proved very steep learning curve for the Aussies. Next day we crossed into Myanmar, previously Burma, and we're on foot just for a quick look round. I bought a Calvin Klein watch for £2 in a market, and you know, it's still going great 5 years later. We crossed back into Thailand, got on our riding gear and rode 90 kilometres to the Laos border at Chiang Mai. On the way we stopped at the Golden Triangle where Thailand, Laos and Myanmar meet on the banks of the mighty Mekong River. Over the next few days we would follow its course as it runs the whole length of Laos. This area is famous for its hill tribe people and for opium growing in previous years, and now illegal. That night we stayed at a lovely hotel on the banks of the Mekong. On day 3 we made an early start to cross the border into Laos. It took us 3.5 hours amidst the hordes of backpackers that were doing the same thing. We picked up a police escort at the border, apparently law in Laos for a group of 6 or more tourist bikes. He spent most of the next few days asleep in our support truck. The road to Luang Namtha was one of the best stretches of windy road through the mountains. 190 kilometres of fun and great scenery. The town itself was very basic, as we ate that night in the street market with Aka Hill tribe ladies in traditional dress wandering around trying to sell us opium. And we were introduced to the excellent local beer, Beer Lao, and also their fiery whiskey. So we're now getting deeper into Laos, and it's obvious that Laos is medieval in comparison with Thailand. Coffee and lunch stops at basic roadside huts, noodle soup cooked on a big pot on an open fire, all very basic. The young Aussie girl was heard to remark, "Sure does take the princess out of a girl," when asked how she enjoyed the toilet facilities in the little hut out the back. We had a 260 kilometre ride through some very traditional remote villages with smiling children waving as we thundered by. Some amazing mountain roads with fantastic scenery and lots of twisties. Happened to meet the Laos ambassador to China at one coffee stop, and he was happy to pose for pictures. And one does need to completely recalibrate the riding brain here to survive. You've got a mix of very twisty mountain roads, lots of potholes, diesel sometimes dropped on the corners, animals of all sorts running across the road, crazy local drivers, and long stretches of dusty dirt road. But hey, I did come for an adventure, not a holiday. The Brit with the wife on the back had a low-speed crash, hurt his ankle, but luckily still able to ride. And tonight's lodging was to be the most basic of our entire trip, at a small town on the banks of the Mekong River again. Today it's day 5, and it's a big day. We're at Pak Beng. Our destination tonight is Luang Prabang, second largest town in Laos. We've got 300 kilometres to ride. more fantastic scenery and twisty roads through the thick and mountainous jungle. Now we left early and loaded the bikes aboard a very basic ferry to take us across the Mekong. The locals looked at us like we were aliens. They probably don't see many Westerners this far off the tourist routes. We rode high up into the mountains and it was quite cold. It was still early and there was a fair bit of morning mist around. Luckily I had heated grips on my BMW, which was great. Our first puncture happened. It was Duncan's CRF 250. He soon had the back wheel out and replaced the inner tube. And where we had stopped was right at the top of the mountain and the view was fantastic with the mist below.
No wonder we had trouble seeing when we were riding down there.
We continued on our way, and after a while Duncan with his small tank needed some petrol, so we stopped at a very quaint service station for him to fill up. I'm not sure exactly what they put in his bike. It did smoke a lot after that. Later in the journey I began to notice large piles of something in the road. It did look a bit like horse manure, but much bigger. A couple of kilometres further on we rounded a corner and there we found 5 working elephants walking along. Now that is a new one on me. What a great sight and photo opportunity. This is what I came for, a completely new experience and riding adventure. The countryside is beautiful. It's hot, nearly 30 degrees. We stopped for a water break by some paddy fields, great scenery. And finally, after a long day's riding through some very remote areas, we arrived back in civilization in the form of Luang Prabang. It's the largest town by Laos standards, with a population of around 55,000. It had been the royal capital of the country until 1975, and once it was the centre of Laotian Buddhism and has lots of temples. It's also famous for its French colonial influence during the 19th and 20th centuries. We crammed our bikes in onto the forecourt of the quaint little hotel, which was down a side street very close to the Mekong. And that night the town was busy with tourists and backpackers. We walked around the bustling night market, where I found some very interesting bottles of alcohol with snakes inside. Our dinner was street food amongst the backpackers. The next day was a rest day, which turned out to be a blessing as 4 of the group were suffering stomach upsets, most likely caused by the street food. The secret, as I've learned, is only to eat freshly cooked food and definitely not anything cold which has had flies on it. Now those of us who were fit enough went to visit the fantastic Quang Si waterfalls. And one of our group, Mike, one of the Brits, decided he was going to jump in. On the way back we stopped at a hill village where this lovely young girl begged me to buy a wristband she had made. Her little sister was playing next to her. How could I resist? Later we checked out the temples before having a cool beer overlooking the Mekong. And Ray Ray, the Brit who had hurt his ankle, he'd been to hospital where they took an x-ray. Apparently they wanted to operate, but he wisely declined. We found out later back in Thailand that nothing was broken, it was actually a ligament injury. So it's now day 7 and we're back on the road again. Luang Prabang to Vang Vieng today. About 230 kilometres of literally breathtaking mountain scenery all day long. Very twisty roads, lots of challenging obstacles on the way. We actually came around one corner and found a fellow biker laying in the road. It was a Canadian guy who had crashed and it looked like he had a badly broken ankle. Not a good place to do it, and he was lucky that we came along. Loaded him on our truck together with his bike and dropped him off at the next small town. Later we stopped for lunch, more noodle soup of course, and then in the afternoon we had our second puncher, and while Duncan was fixing it, a guy came riding along on a scooter with a sidecar which was loaded up and also carrying his dog. Did make me smile. As we neared Vang Vieng, the mountains in this region are really quite amazing. They have some really jagged points. We stopped for a break at a roadside market. Had lots of stalls, some of which were selling some very strange looking pieces of meat and also some furry animals with long tails that were hastily covered up as we walked by. We arrived at our hotel for the night on the banks of the Mekong again. A very nice hotel with chalets dotted around the grounds and of course some great views over the Mekong. The next day we rode to the Laos capital of Vientiane. We encountered 20 kilometres of dirt road on the way in and hordes of scooters to contend with. The French influence was evident, and they'd even built their own version of the Arc de Triomphe. Anyway, on day 10 it was time to leave Laos and cross back into Thailand and deal with the chaos of the Thai immigration on the border. It took us only 2.5 hours this time. The border itself is actually the Mekong River, and the bridge that spans it is called the Friendship Bridge. And once on the Thai side we stopped for a quick lunch in the bustling border town of Nong Khai. We quickly made friends with the local police who came to see us, and found that around the back of the restaurant some guys were watching a cockfight. Not quite sure if that's legal. We followed the Mekong for 200 kilometres to a small town called Chiang Mai, which was our stop for the night. Quaint little town, one street, where all the houses are built of teak, and our hotel looked out over the Mekong. It is traditional apparently in the town that the local monks walk through the main street at 5 a.m. and the villagers come out to fill their bowls with food donations for the day. I'm afraid it was a bit too early for me, and I wasn't awake in the morning to take any pics, but I did see a young monk walking along later. Also, a cheery band of cyclists out for an early morning ride waved as they rode by. So, we set off from Chiang Mai to ride back to Chiang Mai. Nearly 600 kilometres, which would take us 2 days. We had a number of interesting stops along the way. Firstly, a large temple with its giant reclining Buddha. Great opportunity to explore the place and then line us all up with the bikes in front of the Buddha for a photo. We had some really great roads on the way with good smooth surface sweeping through the hills and the mountains. Certainly as good as any of the best roads in Europe. And of course here you get to have noodle soup for lunch. As we neared Chiang Mai, we called in at the Lampang Elephant Conservation Centre. Now they take elephants very seriously out here, and it was good to see poorly animals being brought back to health. Lots of animals of all sizes here. One other stop we made along the way was to sample coconut milk served in a rather unusual way by a man at the roadside. After preparing the fresh coconut with his big knife, he simply pushed a straw in the top for us to drink from. So you got all his fingers? Finally, we arrived back at the TBB shop in Chiang Mai, and it was time to say goodbye to my F800 GS, which had served me well throughout. I then walked round to my little guest house to change for the farewell dinner that night. Now this trip had been everything I'd wanted. It was well organised and administered by TBB. Duncan, our leader, he did a great job of looking after everybody, and the group mix of Aussies and Brits worked well. I would have no hesitation in recommending TBB to anybody looking for a trip in the area. The riding was great, so different to anything I'd done before, especially meeting elephants on the road. Incredible. The scenery was spectacular, the people were friendly and smiling, even though many of them were poor. Children were happy playing just simple games and waved at us as we went by. The food was tasty, and I even got to like noodle soup. And it was warm and sunny, just what I needed as a break from the February cold and wet in the UK. On the plane back home, I started thinking about returning to Thailand and where should I visit next. As it happened, this trip would turn out to be the first of 4 such trips with TBB to different countries surrounding Chiang Mai. The next trip would include Cambodia in 2016, and my riding buddy Bernard will join me. So stay tuned to hear about that trip and the places we visited, such as Angkor Wat and the infamous Killing Fields.